love GLP-1s, I have an issue with some of the dosing protocols that are out there. So I get a patient in, they say, I was barely eating before the GLP-1. Now I'm eating even less because I'm on a very high 7.5 milligrams of tirzepatide, 15 milligrams of tirzepatide, and I'm still visually obese. But I say, give me your labs. And I look at their labs. Oftentimes I find malnutrition markers.
Hey there, I'm Bria, and welcome to the Period Whisperer podcast. If you're over 35 and ready for real answers about your hormones, you're in the right place. Hit subscribe and stay with us. Hey there, sisters. Welcome back to the Period Whisperer podcast. How are you feeling in your body today? I always love to ask that question, because I want you to tap into how you feel and not about how you think you feel. I find that in my work, there's a very specific kind of woman I see all of the time. She's high functioning, she's capable, she's doing all of the things she's supposed to do. From the outside, her life looks stable, successful, even healthy. Is this sounding familiar to you? But underneath, she's exhausted. Her body feels inflamed, reactive, unpredictable. Her mood, her energy, her metabolism feel harder to manage than they used to. And when she goes to get help, she's often told that everything looks normal. So she starts to question herself. And in today's conversation, if this is you, this is for you. I'm joined by Alex Mufson, a licensed clinical social worker and founder of Canary House, an integrative healing practice focused on helping the nervous system regulation for over-functioning women. What it really means to be a hyper-responsive system and how tools like GLP-1s and nervous system regulation can be used in a completely different way than what you're seeing online. I think this is a powerful, nuanced conversation about what's really going on beneath the surface when your body isn't matching your life on paper. Alex, I'm so grateful for your time today. Welcome to the show.
That was a great introduction. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. I know life gets so busy and with our passions for helping others, I really appreciate you taking the time today, and I'm already excited about your energy. So welcome.
Absolutely.
I always love to start with your story. Like, what led you to this work of supporting high functioning women? What led you, to this passion? And how did you get here?
The most obvious answer is I am one. I'm a functioning woman who got really sick. And the longer story is that my first career through my 20s, I was a professional horse trainer. And so I was incredibly active, very strong, and very athletic. And I certainly, through, all of my wisdom of being in my 20s, had but a lot of feelings of invincibility, right? And that actually doesn't coincide with what was actually happening inside my body. And I know that it had started much younger, probably actually in infancy. But by the first I really took note, but not enough because I was tough, like we all are, was, I spent my 18th birthday in the hospital for what they would now call POTS. At the time, it was called Eat More Pretzels.
Yes.
I'm not that old, but that's a long 20 years in research about these things. And I always had very, very difficult periods. I always had periods where I was not menstruating and then really, really acute, really painful menstruation. And as early as when I was 19, 20, I would go to the doctor and they would say, everything looks good. And they would say, you got to stop binge drinking. I'd be like, I don't drink. And they're like, sure you don't, college student. You have to eat. I do eat. Sure you do, college student. It was started really, really young. And I don't think I would have fully identified it other than it really made me mad. But I was tough. And that toughness, I think, especially for, it's a very specific generation of women, millennials, where I think, got the best of what our boomer parents taught us as far as work really hard,
Yeah.
but we also maybe didn't get a lot of the early emotional intelligence from that message. And so I just leaned into the pain. I was like, let's go. And I created a job for myself. I was self-employed as a horse trainer, and it was working. And I was actually quite competent, if not pretty great at my job. And then I literally woke up at 24 years old with some weird feelings on one side of my face. And I was like, huh, okay, maybe I, like, cleaned with something weird, right? Like, you just have that kind of feeling.
Yeah.
And it progressed and it progressed, and I lived in a small town. I went to, like, the little urgent care. They're like, "Oh, maybe you pinched a nerve." And I was like, "Okay." And, like, it kept building over the week. And I went to my chiropractor who I was a horse trainer, so I was wrecking myself constantly, so they knew my level of tolerance really well.
Ah,
And I don't actually usually share this part of the story, but, it feels like your audience is probably like me, where we're like, I'm fine," and everyone around us is used to us being like, I'm fine, I'm fine." And so 24 years old in all my very strong glory, I'm like, "I'm not fine, like, something's really up." And the chiropractor who has seen me, torn up in every possible way as a horse trainer was like, "This girl never says she's not fine." So she actually agreed to order an MRI. And what we found was weird inflammatory lesion in my brain. And I live in Montana. They called me, and she called me and I said, "Well, what do I do? Do I go to the hospital?" And she said, "Actually, the anesthesiologist says you need to get out of the state. We don't know what it is." And I was like, "Well, that's not good." Right? Like, this is not a good.
someone in the state knew what this was, so you need.
They just said, "Don't bother coming into the hospital. The state is not equipped. So you should just get on a plane to a major city."
Wow.
Okay. So I'm 24 years old. I'm thinking, okay, so I'm gonna die, right? Like I go from professional athlete to I'm gonna die. This started an entire chapter of my life that totally changed my relationship with my body, with my functioning, with my understanding of what health and pain and pushing through was. Because I will tell you, the one thing that you cannot push through is neurological impairment because it's your brain and it just says, like, no, and all sorts of weird things that were happening. So I was hospitalized in Chicago. They were like, we don't know what is going on. I mean, I was in the hospital for like a week, had everything. They're like, well, it's getting better. You're probably fine. So, I wasn't. It kept happening, and as I put myself in therapy because all of a sudden I'm thinking like, "Wait, I'm literally a professional athlete, and you're telling me that my brain can just stop working at any time?" And therein started a huge process for me of trying to figure out what my high functioning, push into pain self was if I actually listened. And that created both a change in career. I went on the scary meds that they wanted me to go on as an experiment, and then later on went off because I said, "This is not right for me. You guys don't know what you're doing." And actually at that point I was with Mayo Clinic as a doctor, and they were like, "Yeah, you're right. We don't know what we're doing with this." And so I just ended up having to take matters into my own hands and eventually got a master's, got a clinical license, and worked through all of this both as a professional and as a patient. I was ultimately diagnosed later on with late stage endometriosis, along with a huge other slew of inflammatory issues, but it took fighting for every single piece of those, and the entire time I was getting master's degrees, holding full-time jobs, owning my own companies, I have horses and dogs and a property and got married, divorced, and repartnered, right? So I'm like, no one's guessing that I'm really, really sick, right? Maybe they see weight changes go up and down. That's really all I'm letting the world see. When really, I'm literally having brain hemorrhages and or have rotting inside my organs, right? So I feel like I am the everything looks good girl
Yeah.
in that no matter how bad it got, everyone told me everything looks good. So when I finally was able to start to put the pieces together, which I would say started years before I had the endo diagnosis.
Mhm.
I started understanding this was before COVID, so we weren't talking about cytokine storms and inflammation the way that we are now, but I was starting to put it together. And so concurrently with my master's degree, with my licensure work, I just studied this deeply through myself and through the young women and the women that I was treating. And then it became very clear that though mine is a somewhat scarier story in that sometimes anyone who says brain hemorrhage gets freaked out, my story is actually not that unique. It's unique in some of the features, but it's not that unique in that we are at a crisis point. And so that is where Canary House, my company, came from, and that is why high functioning women who are being told everything looks good all the time as they suffer. And you know what? We will take it all. We will take it all on and we will adapt so beautifully that we can still be crushing everything in our lives and be really, really miserable physically and eventually emotionally because you can't selectively numb, right? Like if you're in this much pain or discomfort or fatigue, it wears on your relationships, it wears on your vitality and who you are. And I actually really think that we need high functioning, inspired people who identify as women working in this world towards their passions. And if they are shrinking their worlds because of all of this, it's a net loss to the world. And so that is why it is my mission because we have to do this work. Otherwise, who else is going to speak for us?
Absolutely. I love that you said that. I think women are magic. I think, and our magic, we've gotten a little lost in dulling it ourselves because there's not a lot of answers for us. And, I think it's so beautiful. Like you said, often our mess becomes our message is what we hear people say. But this desire to help other women who aren't like before they hit that rock bottom is so empowering, I think. And so,
I think I had to do it the way that I did it because I wouldn't have listened otherwise. And I say that because I think there's a lot of women not knowing where the line is.
oh, yeah.
And in some ways, I was really lucky that the scariest presentation hit me at 24
Mhm.
because I had to pay attention to that. And I don't think I would have if it was, and I don't mean to minimize this, I mean to validate, if it was fatigue
Yeah.
or if it was a little bit of pain or if it continued to be pretty excruciating menstrual cycles, I would have not learned anything from that. So in many ways, I'm grateful for the acuity that happened when I was young, but I can also really understand the women who are now, I'm 38 now, are 30s, 40s, 50s, and didn't have that breaking point, and so it was just reinforced to them that they can push through things. What I learned is that I'm really tough, and I think that's what all of us are learning too, and sometimes we have to be a little less tough in order to say, "No, I refuse to agree with you saying everything looks good, and if it's not you as my provider, there is someone else." I wanna be the provider I should have had, you know? I should have had her at 18.
Yeah, I love that, and I think we forget in this push through mentality and this I am strong enough because we also were fed like, it was very fascinating to hear you say on this, we got that stiff upper lip messaging from the boomers, but not like the others but as we entered this world of, I think, women being like, "All your dreams can come true. You can do anything if you work hard enough." So, I think we expect this of ourselves whilst, holding in anything that's challenging for us, and I think it's important to remember that bravery is also asking for help sometimes and recognizing we can't be amazing at everything all at once.
I mean, we end up being very easy to gaslight
Yeah.
because it's really easy when someone says everything looks good, you are fine, this is psychological. That's actually really easy for our generation of women to accept very, very quickly because we're willing to say, okay, how do I take radical accountability for myself,
Mm.
radically accept my symptoms, and move forward? And I'm like so impressed that we're all doing that so well because that's a very hard skill, but it also means that we're not actually forcing the medical system to get better because what I know now as a provider is that there is a difference between traditional medicine and regulatory medicine, and this is actually a new form of medicine that is emerging out of the crisis and out of the research. This isn't woo-woo medicine, like, there's beautiful research on this, but it's not making that jump into clinical practice in a traditional way, which is why people like me and the people on my team who have kind of odd backgrounds to be primary care providers are taking that place because we're able to look at the science from a totally different view, and the people who are not being served by traditional medicine find us, and you, I'm sure.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we do at some point because we're driven as women and we do get to a point where like there must be answers here somewhere. I'm not willing to like lay down and accept that this is my life and wave the white aging flag. I do think that there's this desire to like look to alternative options and start to question. We're seeing this beautiful movement because of practitioners like you and I hope myself that I think we're starting to question more and not just take it.
I know I always say that if someone is telling you that what you're pursuing is, like, too fringe or too sketchy or too out there, they probably haven't been desperate before,
Oh,
and we've been desperate.
yeah. I have to before I have so many questions, but, like, can you tell me how you so it's at 38 now, you've been through all this, you just how do you feel now in your body?
I feel, first of all, very trusting in my body, which is not to say that I don't still have the ripple effects of so many years of untreated disease. I do, and I am still very diligent. I eat beautifully structured. I take my supplements. I'm actually on a peptide and low dose naltrexone. I love all of these things. I literally started a store in my small town. I own a health food store because I wanted to be able to control what I eat. Like, I'm not saying I'm not putting effort in. What I am doing though is I know that now when my body throws off fatigue, pain, brain fog, I am very clear that this is a message of regulation, and though it happens less and less and less, and I feel strong and good, I even if some other presentation of health issues showed up, I would respond so much faster than I did when I was young because the block that was kind of put into me to push into those feelings has been dissolved, and that is, I think, my greatest achievement, and I feel proud that I have done so much healing work in things that are considered, not healable, like endometriosis, PCOS. Like, I no longer have PCOS, which I'm told that's not possible, but check out my ovaries, it's definitely possible. So, I have pictures. I really trust that when my body says something, it has a message, and I also have learned that sometimes if I'm not paying attention, it will turn into, like a thought, like a cognitive message that may or may not have explicit directions as to what to do, but if I feel preoccupied by something, that's my moment to stop and really listen, and that is a huge that's like having the best relationship that I could ask for.
Oh, I love that you say that because I agree. I think the most challenging piece that we're working to heal as women is the first step towards trust with our in the relationship with ourself. We've gotten I think we don't trust our body, and so our body doesn't trust us, and that's often where we land in these stuckness. It's like, how do you begin to slow down and really like listen to the message that your body and honor it? Actually explore it, be curious about it, and that's challenging in this high productivity, high functioning world that we're in.
And growing up as, little girls in the '90s and 2000s, like, the view of our bodies was from outside of ourselves, and so really to bring that view back to ourselves is it's I think it's a pretty revolutionary move.
Yeah. I don't wanna get ahead of myself here, but it's like I can feel in my mind that I just wanna be like, what are the steps that we can start to take to get there? Because I know and I want women to understand, like, what you're talking about, this, like, rebelling against that and, like, deeply connecting with your body and honoring it is so possible, and because of all the mess around us, it's challenging. Like, it takes time, maybe is really what I should say.
I mean, the first step is to eat fat.
Yeah.
I know that sounds really, really basic, but we were trained not to eat fat. We're never feeling satiated, and it really, really does it breaks something really deep inside to realize that that's actually what humans feel good receiving. It creates a level of physiological safety, and the reason I answered with that is that you're already buying food, so you don't have to pay me to eat fat. You don't have to pay anyone to eat fat. You just have to make these small shifts to allowing yourself to be satiated, and the fallout of that in a positive way is that your body starts to get small safety signals that we 90s, early 2000 girls who were eating, fat-free everything because
And butter
that's
was all.
yeah, I mean, who ate butter? Like, right? Like, we were just chugging seed oils, basically. And and so it's both a and I say this as a mental health practitioner and someone who does functional healing. By eating fat, we send a message to our brain, to our organs, that things are safe, and then we start to untangle all that stuff that happened in our early years that said, "Be smaller, eat the seed oils, avoid all of that, and we start to shift. I mean, it's an actionable change that someone does not have to pay a practitioner to buy butter instead of butter replacement.
Oh, yeah, or full fat yogurt instead of
Yeah.
the one, or full fat
Right.
milk if you drink milk, like, it's shocking the difference how you feel in your body when you kinda let that one go, isn't it?
Truly nuts. It's usually the same price.
Yes.
Yeah. Exactly.
Which and you're getting so much more nutrients. It's
Yeah.
I find, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this because I think this can be a mental shift for people, and we get really stuck in this like, well, I want to do what used to work because everything feels out of control, so I need to go control myself by doing what works in my 20s or in my whatever. But here we are, we're talking to midlife women. You're telling them, and I am agreeing with you that one of the first things we should do is eat fat. I find that what I notice when I eat higher fat is I am genuinely more satisfied in between meals. I don't have that same food noise. I have more consistent energy. I'm satisfied off of even a smaller amount of food. Is that what you notice?
Yeah, that's what I notice, and I also would add to that because I know so many of the people listening to your podcast are probably attentive to their protein intake. The other piece of that is that you might feel satiated and it's harder to hit those protein goals. And so something that's really important is to find that balance of when you're eating that fat and why, and not overly obsessing over one thing or another, but saying like, okay, I know that I get satiated really quickly. I actually don't want to eat all of the food that would, if I were to just eat straight food, would equal 115 grams of protein, right? Like that's not, I'm not interested in that much food. So I have to make sure that I eat my protein first, and then I'm probably still going to be hungry, right? Whereas if I eat fat first, which I love it, and I am eating a lot of fat, I also notice that I become satiated a little sooner, and then I might get hungry an hour later. And so that's one of those things where it's like, listen to your body in a positive way. If you're hungry an hour later because you had beautiful, beautiful fat, that's totally fine. Just eat some protein, right? Like, listen, or eat carbs. I mean, sometimes we eat fat and then we don't want the protein and carbs. Wait an hour, your body will throw off those signals. And instead of saying, oh my gosh, why am I so hungry all day? Think, oh, well, I ate fat, which satiated me really quickly. And so my body is now speaking to me and saying, like, hey, knock, knock, you didn't quite get enough protein and carbs. Let's have that snack right now. And that could be your beautiful pea protein shake, or it could be a chunk of meat if you eat meat. If you don't eat meat, there's plenty of other ways. I don't eat meat, and there's plenty of ways to hit that protein.
Yeah, for sure. Do you eat dairy? Are you vegan?
I do. I did not for a long time prior to this healing that I have done because there was a window in my process where my gut was so destroyed, and I didn't know this yet, this was years ago, that I wasn't actually able to tolerate eating much of anything. And I mentally love the idea of being vegan, so I was just like, "Well, I feel I have to be vegan, like, that feels better," right? Eventually, though, if your microbiome and your, gut permeability becomes bad enough, you can't even eat the vegan food. And so what I had to do was first heal my gut to then be able to tolerate the dairy, and then dairy was like, "Give it to me, I'm so ready." And I see this a lot of time in my clients is like, they come and they say, "Well, I'm intolerant to all of these things," but really it's the regulatory process or it's, what high zonulin levels, which is leaky gut, and we can support that, and then you get food back. Like, when I gave myself butter back after I did all the gut healing, that was such a beautiful day.
Totally. I like am excited. I have goosebumps for you just hearing this.
Yeah, I know, like,
I know.
getting butter back.
And I love that you brought this up because I do, we were talking a bit about labs before we hopped on, so maybe we can dive into it a little. Like, running a GI map to look at that gut microbiome with zonulin is a pretty common part of my practice for women because I find that I always work on nutrition first. Some women, whether we're needing to increase their protein or their fat or whatever, can have some digestive issues because they're not breaking down or absorbing their proteins or their fats appropriately. Can you talk a little bit about that or if you see that too?
Yeah, I actually will use I haven't actually heard anyone else talk about this example, so I'm gonna use it. We have a fair amount of our patients are what I would call high responders in that they're really sensitive to regulatory changes. And what I see often are people who actually don't eat enough or even are on high dose GLP-1s, which this is a little teaser. I'm sure we'll get into this. I love GLP-1s. I have an issue with some of the dosing protocols that are out there. So I get a patient in, they say, "Look, I'm barely eating. I was barely eating before the GLP-1. Now I'm eating even less because I'm on a very high 7.5 milligrams of tirzepatide, 15 milligrams of tirzepatide, and I'm still visually obese." But I say, "Well, give me your labs." And I look at their labs. Oftentimes, I find malnutrition markers. And that's really hard for a traditional provider because we are all humans, right? And we have all grown up in a world that was very fat shaming. And the question isn't ever, why has your body retained this much fat? It's usually, what are you not doing or doing too much of that you deserve to be fat, right? Like that's kind of the narrative, and that fat is bad. If we treat fat as a signal, why is your body holding it or why is your body not holding it? Because underweight is also a thing. Then we start looking. So I'm finding people, and this we get this more, I would say, than it is the percentage of this happening in the world because of who comes to us. But people who are not losing weight on high dose GLP-1s are not losing weight even at what I would consider, if I were giving a mental health diagnosis just on behavior, they would have an anorexia diagnosis. It's because the regulatory processes aren't working. And so th this is a bit tricky when you are working with nutrition because someone can be doing all the right things or even doing not enough, and if their regulatory system isn't working well, they don't get the results, and that is a really frustrating place to be with nutrition. So I'm always very careful about who the person is and what their body is ready for as far as nutritional changes. So if I have someone with true malnutrition markers, whether or not they fall in the obesity category, I don't care. The first thing I'm doing is food down the hole, right? Like, it's as basic as, like, food down, and I am saying, "Please try for fats, please try for proteins," but at that point, I'm not going to say, "These are exclude all of this, do this." No, because we're already in a really dangerous place. We are going to adjust the regulatory system. So, oftentimes, the first step is eat more.
Yeah.
And that's a really hard thing, again, for, women in our age group to handle, and if they are on a high dose GLP-1, it's often bring the GLP-1 way down. I don't often stop them because usually these people also have, dysregulated insulin and glucose, and so the idea of a GLP and inflammation is great, but we come way down in the dose. We probably add some specific supplements, like many have never had their ferritin tested, which is an iron marker, and their hemoglobin looked normal, so they got, "Oh, your iron's great, you're not anemic." Or their ferritin's like, you know, a 20, and they're like, "Oh, that's within normal ranges." That's not within normal ranges. That's within not dead ranges. So, I'm glad you're not dead, but that's not actually gonna be optimal energy. So, we make these adjustments and then expand with the person's tolerance for being able to manage, because some people are not ready to manage what they're eating because they haven't been eating at all. But once that eating stops feeling so bad, because really, when your glucose is dysregulated, eating feels bad. Every time you eat, I've experienced this. Every time you eat, you feel bad after. And so you stop wanting to eat. If you have severe leaky gut, eating feels bad. You don't wanna eat. So first we gotta get that relationship healed, and that's not a mental health relationship. That though we have to figure out what the regulatory system is doing that is making eating not feel like a reward. Then we get to do all sorts of fun things like get butter back once we know that the system can handle it.
I'm just so curious as practitioner to practitioner, so I hope this is valuable for everyone listening. But when you talk about, because you pulled out some blood chemistry markers that we talked about hemoglobin, we talked about ferritin. When you're talking about malnourished markers, what are those for you? Are they on the blood work and the thyroid? Are they like, what are you noticing?
Well, they can show up in a lot of different places. I wanna say, like, the lack of sufficient feed is something that affects everything. So, you might be eating adequately, but you're not absorbing the ferritin, things like that. So, I'm often looking at things like ferritin, I'm looking at thyroid, as you mentioned, but not just TSH, like the full panel. Um, I'm also looking this is a subtle piece that I think is the most important. I'm looking at what the body has decided it doesn't need to prioritize. So, oftentimes sometimes that's really literal, like, it's in the lipid panel, it's like, "This is malnutrition," right? Like, I think if you find someone who's literally in that state, that's probably what you as a provider expect to see is like, your lipid panel is dysregulated, your iron is dysregulated, things like that. Usually, I mean, almost every woman that I look at her lab work has some version of dysregulated insulin or glucose, on some level. Sometimes they're within normal ranges for like the traditional docs, but they're dysregulated. So I'm looking there, but then I'm also looking at um, what they are relative to each other. So what is the body saying is most important now? So you work with a lot of hormones, so I'll use that as an example. If you have, say, hormones that still present, right? You have, you're clearly ovulating, you are demonstrating that your ovaries work. Um, like, I personally don't have a uterus, that's not part of it. It's more like, are you showing the clinical signals of ovulation? But then, are all of your hormones slid down? So you might have the right proportions, maybe not. You might still be estrogen dominant. We hear that a lot. It's like, oh, well, you're estrogen dominant. That's what we should focus on. But are you like way down? Is your estrogen like on the Dutch, like, a 30 or a 20, or is your testosterone a 6? So I'm looking at like, okay, the body is not prioritizing sex hormones right now. And if we're not prioritizing reproduction, we're in a fairly significant survival state. So it becomes like a relative issue that's really important. Then I can often go one step further because again, someone will say, "Oh my gosh, I'm so sad. My Dutch test came back and actually everything looks good." And they repeat that again. They're like, even if they saw an ND, they're like, "Oh, my sex hormones are good." And I'm like, "Okay, let's take a look." And then the next thing we're looking at is, okay, how are we using both the sex hormones, but also things like dopamine and tryptophan? How are they translating? So everybody loves to talk about dopamine because everyone is like, "I have ADHD." Okay, let's see. Are you dopamine deficient on the Dutch test, or are you dopamine utilization? Is that low? And we can see that. That's the magic of all this. We can see if you have dopamine, but you're not using it. Or tryptophan is one of my favorites because it comes out in a variety of markers. One is called the quinolytic acid, which is a really easy one to talk about. Um, and I can never say the pathway, but it's the curinate pathway. Maybe you can say it. But the tryptophan is supposed to give us beautiful serotonin and melatonin and all these things that feel good. That's why if you eat a turkey, you feel all like you wanna fall asleep and you feel all warm and fuzzy. But when you're in survival mode, in particular, these people who, like I said, we're looking at tricky little markers of, redirecting resources, tryptophan will go down this other pathway, and it'll come out as 2 different types of acids, and these are really interesting. The quinolytic acid will put you in a, like, supercharged state, which is like, you just totally dismiss the fact that you are, dying and you keep going. It's a survival mechanism. It's really good at it. I can usually predict the women that will have this marker. And then you can have another, the Curinate, I can't say it. It starts with a K, guys. When you look at your Dutch test, starts with a K. I feel the other direction it can go will make you feel like you don't care about taking care of yourself. You only care about your surroundings, which also is a big survival mechanism, especially among women, because we're reinforced for that. And so I see these little tiny neurotransmitter changes sometimes that we have to go all the way there. Like everything looks good, everything looks good, everything looks good. Like we're going all the way down to this. And then we find, well, you make dopamine, but you don't use it. You make tryptophan, but it's coming out this other direction. Like, and then we can really get to the good stuff because now we finally figured out why you have these feelings, even though, and also like why your body looks a certain way and feels like it should retain all the fat.
Mm.
Because it's say thank you to your body for retaining all that fat because it's doing it so you don't die. And it really thinks that you're dying right now.
I have really come to appreciate that our body is a goddamn Shiva. Like, she
It's
is
amazing.
purely here to keep us alive, and if we don't respect that, then we're missing the point.
And she will slough anything that is not essential,
Yep.
right? Like, everything and all the way down, and I'm like sometimes with women who still are producing sex hormones and things like that, but have these markers, I'm like, "Whoa, your body was even willing to have a baby and do all this." Like, talk about multitasking, like, that's crazy.
Hey, Alex, so this I don't know, I mean, I feel like you and I went nerdy out there, so I hope that wasn't too much for everyone listening, but I found that super fascinating. So, for anyone listening, first simple step to try on your own, doesn't cost you anything, is eat some
Mhm.
fat. Eat
Mm.
some fat, and then
And do it before if you can, first thing in the morning and then before bed.
yeah.
If you can start to help your body, because insulin and melatonin are actually really connected. And if you can do it within an hour waking up and then an hour going to bed, you'll probably slowly start to sleep better. And ladies, I'm aware your cortisol is through the roof. You're not going to sleep great on night one doing this, but it will slowly help you get through those 3 a.m. wake ups.
Yeah, I love that you say that because I do think it's so important to remember our body is not a vending machine. It takes a little while for her to also exhale and be like, "Oh, okay, this is not a one-off situation. Trust that it's real." Okay, so start with get some fat into your real fat into your day. Don't shy away from it and pay attention to how it makes you feel. And if you're not feeling better, significantly better, or you still have questions, then it's time to call a practitioner, right? To reach
Yeah,
out.
we love data,
Yeah, to
right?
go to the data.
I can make quite a few. This is the intersection of my mental health training with my physiological training. Like, I can actually guess pretty clearly based on what you tell me about your experience and your mental health, what your labs will look like, because often those are expressions of what's going on in the body. However, we should not be making major medical decisions without data when the data is available to get. So, I'm actually not even that excited about you taking a wide variety of clinical supplements without proper data because we've talked a little bit about the microbiome so far, and this is the one that I see people really hurt themselves the fastest is probiotics because a lot of people have they don't know that they have intestinal overgrowth. So the doctors call it SIBO, but it means a lot of things. And so you have some stomach dysfunction. You're feeling a little gassy or crampy or food intolerant or whatever. You go get a probiotic. Well, what does that mean? Because there's hundreds and hundreds of strains of bacteria, and if you happen to take the one that you already have an overgrowth of, you can not only have worsening gastrointestinal symptoms, that's almost guaranteed, but you can actually have what appear to be mood disorder symptoms. And there are actual documented cases, and I've experienced this in a variety of ways, that the wrong probiotic can look like mania, it can look like depression, it can look like paranoia, and that is all the signaling from the bacteria in your gut. So I always say, what are you trying to fix with the probiotic? And if you really want to go down that rabbit hole, let's get a GI map and make sure that it's not something else. Because sometimes people who you're almost positive are going to have dysfunctional microbiomes because of their presentation
Mhm.
don't, and it turns out to be neuroimmune. It turns out to be coming from the receptors in the brain, not the receptors in the stomach. Again, we can test for all of this, but if we don't, and we just jump to the conclusion that you might be short a certain bacteria, w I mean, for lack of a better term, we can make you go crazy, and I'm really, anti make you go crazy. Like, yeah, we don't want you to go down. No.
We promise. I love that you said that because I think women sometimes need permission to go digging more deeply into themselves, whether it's taking the time or whether it's taking the money and investing in themselves. I think this clarity that you're offering of like we all want to get there faster. Alex has already given us like two very clear steps to help you get there faster if you want to. It might still not be fast, but it will be the fastest yellow brick road that you can find without.
And I think just the speed desire is such a important thing to name because we're really programmed to feel like there should just be like a pill that makes it better. But when it's a regulatory issue, not, I mean, look, if you literally don't produce insulin, you're truly diabetic, there are great ways to give your body insulin because it's not producing it. That is traditional medicine's excellent at that.
Yeah,
And I'm not here to say that if you are needing something like that, that you shouldn't do it. That's where traditional medicine is awesome.
yeah.
However, when you're just not regulating glucose and insulin properly, but you make it and maybe make it too fast, right? Like maybe your liver can't produce enough glucose and you can't eat enough sugar fast enough to get to match the amount of insulin that's coming out. And, I like to use myself as an example here. I was always the kid that needed to get up and have like fruit or juice immediately, or I like couldn't function, like carbs, like needed that immediately. Carried that well into adulthood, was totally the person who gets hangry, disoriented, like cannot miss a meal. I always watch people who just were like, oh, I forgot to eat breakfast. And I'm like, how? because that has never happened to me. So then I get older and older and older. And I also, this seems unrelated, but I promise it's not. I also have these more intrusive thoughts about financial scarcity. So that was like my thing. Like if I'm like trying to figure out what my recurring little OCD loop is, like not having enough money. And that usually is, it's totally disconnected from the bank account. I can be poor, I can be doing great, doesn't matter. Well, it never occurred to me that these were the same issue until I decided to start taking a peptide at a microdose that managed glucose because I knew I had the glucose issue and I knew that that was progressing and getting worse as I aged. So I went to solve that because the testing showed I was producing insulin too fast and my glucose couldn't keep up. That's why I'm like downing raspberries, right? Like give me all the raspberries to try to like spike it to match.
And
So
raspberry a decent choice where some of us might not be choosing raspberries.
sure, exactly. Could have been donuts, doesn't matter. Um, No, don't worry. My gut microbiome wouldn't let me have the donuts. So I'm like down in the fruit, trying to spike my glucose, which again, if you're downing sugar like that, whether it's raspberries or candy, it's probably for a reason. So this is happening. Test my insulin. I know that the insulin is coming and I know it's coming rapid fire. So like what's going on? My liver doesn't produce enough glucose. So go on a peptide because I didn't really like the traditional answers, which is like metformin and things like that. They didn't feel good to me.
Mm.
So go on a peptide, solves it very quickly, which was really, really exciting. But what I didn't expect was those thoughts about not having enough money also disappeared. So what was my body actually translating into thought loops? A lack of sugar. And you know what buys sugar? Money.
Right.
And so probably this happened for generations in my family. And I've heard this with other people in my lineage. I have Eastern European lineage, and I've actually heard this exact complaint. And I'll say, "Ooh, I know exactly what peptide you need based on this preoccupation." So what I learned from working with someone, and I learned first from myself, was that a lot of our thoughts and what seems like mental health are actually our body trying to communicate something. So that's back to that trust of like, if I have a recurring thought that doesn't line up to reality, I'm safe, I have money, I'm educated, I'm not going to go broke, and also is treatment resistant. Didn't matter how much beautiful therapy I did with the best therapists, treatment resistant thought did not go away. Well, when I had enough glucose, thought was gone.
Alex, this is so flipping fascinating. If I swore more it would out, it would come. So let's talk about, I know, tell me about this peptide because I've talked about peptides on the shows. I use it in my practice. Are you talking about a GLP-1 peptide here when you're talking?
In my story, I am. I'm talking about tirzepatide, not at the doses that we're seeing on the commercials. So I can talk about that, but I also want to let you know that peptide is a huge range of amino acids. So though for me, my thought was connected to a glucose loop, right? And that was longstanding. I actually, from what my parents say, like weaned myself at a young age because clearly there was something going on that like food didn't feel good, right? Because that's the only reason a baby stops nursing, right? It's like food doesn't feel good. So for me, it was very obvious that there was like long-standing metabolic dysfunction that I would say probably was at the start of some of these bigger health issues like the inflammatory disorders, endometriosis, things like that. So for me, I needed a peptide that regulated the glucose because that was a foundational dysregulation that was putting my body into a stress state. So for me, I needed that. And so the typical tirzepatide dosing for weight loss that we're seeing at like the online peptide pharmacies and stuff starts, and these studies are attached to diabetes work, starts at 2.5 milligrams, goes all the way up to 15 milligrams, and is pretty compulsive about its dosing increases.
Yeah.
I started at 1.5 milligrams and have never gone above it. And for anyone who is wondering, like, well, did you still lose weight? Yes, absolutely. Um, I was not in the obesity category, but even if I were, I actually believe that the weight gain that I had was regulatory. It was not actually about, I know it wasn't about what I was eating because I know exactly what I was putting into my body. It was just about when your body is in scarcity, it holds,
Oh,
right? And so that's a very different conversation than the way that GLP-1s are often marketed are for the appetite suppression side effect,
Yeah.
which, in my opinion, if you're dosing GLP-1s correctly, you should actually not have appetite reduction. You're cheering, which makes me so happy because usually people look at me like I just said something crazy.
Oh, I say this to every one of my clients when we decide to do a microdose because I am like you. I only believe in the microdoses because why would we give our body more than it should have on its own? But
Unless you have something like a disease state like diabetes that needs to be treated with a higher dose. Yeah.
for that disclaimer, but I am always like, if you should be hungry. If you are not hungry, it is too much. I absolutely agree with you. I think, and what is shocking, not it's no longer shocking to me, but what I am perpetually amazed by is how all of my clients eat pretty much the same and they feel so much better. They sleep better, they have better energy, they do lose weight if they needed to lose. If there's weight that needs to be released because it's being held on to, it goes. But that I think is just the unsung hero of what, and this is your point here, I think, is if we truly understand the value of this and what it's helping our body do and we're giving an appropriate amount, it can be really helpful.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't actually need nutrition training, I or exercise training, and again, you still need to be doing resistance work. You still need to be moving your body. You still need to be caring for it as the critter that it is. But if your body is not producing enough, in this case, GLP-1, GIP, but also just on like a higher level, for me, if my liver can't keep up with my insulin and I'm in a constant glucose deficit, um, that that is just treatment. That's it's just regulatory treatment, but it's a very different. You have to start from a place of not blaming the person for what's going on, and there are people, like I said, if you have true diabetic dysfunction, there are some studies that indicate that these higher doses might be best for you if you're not a hyper responder. I am like, you look at me and then that changes something in my body. And most of my patients are also in that hyper responsive category, which is how we are so high functioning, right? Because we're able to make micro adjustments both mentally and physiologically that support us succeeding. So the GLP-1 I think is a fantastic tool, and it is not the only peptide. And there are other things that I often go to for other presentations, and I'll just use, is it okay if I use one example?
Oh, I want you, yeah, I know.
Okay. So I'm doing a little throwback because earlier we were talking about the dopamine thing,
Yeah.
and we were talking about the tryptophan and all the, like, conversions there. Well, there's 2 approaches that I take to that. One is a peptide, one is not, but they're both within the same regulatory medicine, framework. So there's a peptide called C-Link C-Max. It's actually 2 peptides put together. It was originally from Russia, studied as stroke repair. So you can imagine if you have a stroke, you have damage to the synapses, to the things that connect your brain together. And so you're trying to rebuild those, right? So the research is in Russian. You have to translate it, but it's pretty good. It's great research. It's peer reviewed. It's lovely. And there's not a lot of research about how to repurpose this peptide because just like GLP-1s were originally used for one thing and now they're being used for honestly a million things, which I'm excited about. This one hasn't really gotten that name recognition. But what I find that it does beautifully is support the body to take what it's already producing and shore up the to be non-scientific about it, like the pathway to using it. So if you have dopamine, but you're not getting to use the dopamine, it like moves the dopamine to where it's supposed to go. And so it's beautiful regulatory. A lot of people who have like symptoms that look like lack of motivation, sometimes look like ADHD, sometimes look like a difficulty feeling satisfaction. So another little thing that'll go up is like if you only like to work out until you get sore, if that's how you get the feedback loop that you did a good job, you're probably a candidate for this peptide because you're not getting the chemical release to then feel that you did a good job. So a lot of the time this looks like either underperforming or overperforming depending on how you like process the fact that you never get satisfaction from anything. Some people get more disciplined and they're like, I get satisfaction by getting sore or by following my schedule. Some people go, what's the point? I don't feel any better. These are two sides of the same coin. So this peptide it will support it's actually a combo of peptides. It will support the what you're already producing getting used. So if someone doesn't have a metabolic framework to whatever is dysfunctional, like I clearly had a metabolic framework to it, I'm not going to give tirzepatide, which is the Mounjaro, Zepbound, GLP-1, GIP. I'm not going to give that to someone who doesn't have a metabolic aspect to whatever's happening for them. And I know that sounds like really basic, but when we talk about extrapolating how these things can be used, that's amazing. I want people doing that. I want you experimenting, but the data will tell you if you need to be in this pathway or if you need to be, say, in the cognitive peptide pathway. And it might not be one or the other. Like there might be a chapter or a season in your life where it'll be a different need, but it's just really important not to see them as the same. Like everyone says peptides, but I'm like, oh my gosh, if someone with insulin dysfunction takes the cognitive peptide, they're going to be sorely disappointed in the results.
Yeah. So what are some of the results you see from someone who needs the more cognitive peptide? And, two questions. One, is the Selenk Max like your favorite stack or favorite peptide for the
For
cognitive?
that presentation, if I'm using peptide, I will say I often either pair it or kind of do it because that's only a 10-week protocol. So like GLP-1, GIP, you do that continuously for a long time. The other peptides are usually you have to take breaks. So you do like a 10-week course and then you take 4 to 6 weeks off. And then often you don't have to recycle it. Sometimes you do, but sometimes it's done what it needs to do. So to answer the first part of your question, I see people report to me that they feel more like themselves, that they feel like they didn't realize where the background stickiness or like worry was until it kind of went away and they felt more like smoothness in their task initiation. They feel more smooth. So it's very different than like Adderall, which is a stimulant that might be used like a traditional doctor might give Adderall or even Wellbutrin to the same issue. Um, they don't feel the rev or the stimulation. A really interesting side effect is sometimes people who have been self-medicating for this problem with coffee uh, no longer tolerate coffee very well because it's overstimulating to them because they've already now they're already stimulated in the place that they were kind of coffee works downstream of where this works. Like if you think of the brain is upstream and coffee is downstream. But so I see that. I see more intimacy as far as like conversational engagement and initiation. That's something that the person themselves can't always feel immediately. But we as practitioners and then ask their partners, will feel it. There's just like there's an ease, of connection that often isn't there in the stickiness, and when we just look at that as pathology, we just think like, "Oh, that's just the ADHD brain," or whatever people wanna say. That's actually not it. That's like, they're not getting anything back from the conversation because they're not getting any, um if it's dopamine in this example, they're not getting that feeling of pleasure, and so there's just like a different they might love you, but there's a different connection to it, so there's like an easefulness that comes into it, so that it's not that that's my favorite peptide. I don't take that peptide personally because that's not my thing. I al Then the second part of your question, as far as, like, is that the best thing for that issue? Often I also layer, low dose naltrexone into a lot of these issues because that actually works even further upstream from any of the peptides, in my opinion, and what the science looks like. So you've probably heard of naltrexone as in Narcan, which is the thing that you give someone in an opioid crisis or an alcohol crisis. That's not how we're using it, and that's not the dosing. But that's where people immediately go, "What? You're giving me what? You're giving me Narcan?" I'm like, "You're not having a fentanyl overdose. This has nothing to do with that." It works in there's a two-prong approach to well, I would argue that low dose naltrexone does a million things. But the really easy to understand two parts of it is it engages the opioid receptors and closes them down, which is why at a high dose, Narcan's like 55 milligrams. The average person that I'm starting is going to be somewhere between 0.25 milligrams and 4.5 milligrams. So that's like a much, that's a microdose essentially. In this compound, they just call it low dose, but it's a microdose. So when you're at a low dose, when you go to bed at night, your opioid receptors are supposed to go sleepy. Like, to put it really, they're supposed to quiet. And that's because those are the things that are shooting out. Um, the visual of shooting out is not totally accurate, but for you all to understand it, it's basically what's controlling the cytokines, which are the inflammatory agents throughout your body. So they're like, the opioid receptors are like, something's wrong, go find it. So I think of them as little Power Rangers, and they're sending them out.
That tells you what you're when you just said Power Rangers. Okay, go.
A lot of us who have this sort of like, let's call it the millennial woman dysregulation, um, we have overridden that. Our systems, which there are like scientific names for these systems, but the systems have basically left those opioid receptors wide open. And so they're in a constant state of seeking out danger. So this is what we find when someone has pain that doesn't stay in one place, or they have fatigue that doesn't respond to rest, or maybe they have burning or tingling in their limbs, but they don't have structural lesions or anything that should be causing that. So low dose naltrexone every night puts those opioid receptors to sleep like they should be for 3 or 4 hours, and then lets them open back up naturally. You get a beautiful endorphin release, and it slowly starts to modulate the inflammatory response, the healing response, so that it's back to where it should be. If someone is already in like a healthy state. This is often used in the like longevity spaces for like optimization, but I would say like that's kind of a misdirection for it, because those of us who are just chronically dysregulated, this is a modulator of the immune response. And then the other thing that it does is there's these things called, and I did not make this name up, I swear, the toll-like receptors, like toll booth on the highway. I don't think they have those anymore, but toll booth on the highway, toll-like receptors that are supposed to, like, if someone sneezes in your face, they're supposed to, like, block it
Yeah.
so that it can't get into you. Low-dose naltrexone also supports modulation of those. So you have kind of, that's why sometimes it's used in, like, tandem with cancer treatments that are reducing your immune system, things like that. So it has these two branches of neuroimmune modulation. You've heard of autoimmune, which is like you have the immune system targeting one system in your body. Neuroimmune is the dysregulation of, or neuroimmune dysfunction is the dysregulation of your brain knowing when it has modulated or regulated enough of the immune response or the inflammation response. So that's why people who have chronic pain that doesn't sit in one spot, it's not like, "Oh, I only have pain where I have this injury." They're like, "Well, today my feet hurt, but yesterday my tailbone hurt," right? Like, it like, 'cause it's looking for something to be wrong, and, when something is wrong, we want it to inflame because that's the healing protocol. But when it's not wrong, it's really kinda crappy when your feet swell up, right? Like, that's unnecessary, but your body's like, "Well, that impact from walking," your brain's like, "Maybe that's the problem because 'cause we're just wide open." So low dose naltrexone at the low doses, and I'm talking, I have people who are overly responsive to it at 0.25 milligrams. I personally take 3 milligrams because I have a little more of the drama in my inflammatory response, as my story has shown. But we use it at all sorts of doses. That's something that will often, once we use the peptide, say we used C-Link, C-Max, to bring the dopamine forward, then we might get to regulate it with an ultra micro dose, like 0.5 milligrams. Or if you're someone like me who's using it more for inflammatory purposes, we might get up to 3 milligrams, 4.5 milligrams, because it's just like a more, mine was a little more dysregulated versus someone who's just like not getting access. I say just, but it's pretty catastrophic. But they're just not getting access to their neurotransmitters. So does that kind of like paint the picture of how LDN would work with a peptide?
Yeah, absolutely. I find that, like, super fascinating. I think for anyone listening, I mean, one, again, what I'm always so amazed by and what I'm gathering from this conversation is, when I love how you lay out, like, one, there's absolutely hope. So and two, we start with the foundations, like start with that fat, you get your data, and then we up level into some fancy pants stuff, which is what, I think about that with. I love that. Like we have to do these underlying pieces, but there's so much opportunity. And really, part of the reason we're here is from this over-functioning situation that we have lived for decades. Do I have that right?
Yes, and there's science behind that that I won't go into today, but the fat piece, for instance, when I started low dose naltrexone, my body all of a sudden only wanted hard-boiled eggs. I never really cared about hard-boiled eggs ever, and literally, I looked at, like, vegetables and which have always been my favorite, like, I'm a veggie girl, and for, like, a month of onboarding it, it was, like, flat. I was like, "I can't eat those, but give me a hard-boiled egg with salt," and it was a really interesting experience to be like, "Oh, my body knows what it needs." My body is literally rewiring something neurologically, and, like, an egg is the perfect little vehicle to just pop exactly those nutrients without taking very much to process. Because vegetables are colorful and flavorful and, like, it made my brain work, and when I started really thinking about the fact that eating a vegetable is brain work and, like, the egg is the simplicity, I'm like, "Wow, so much must be happening in my brain that I am so unaware of that we can play with and that we can make changes in," and so, yeah, I would say, yes, your fat, your sleep, your resistance training, and if you don't feel well still, the message is, like, get the tests
Yeah.
and, and work collaboratively. Like, most people, we're not their only they usually have a you, and then the you consults with us.
Yeah.
We work with them for, like, 3 to 6 months,
Mhm.
to get these other compounds in that are a bit more creative, and then we're like, "Fly." Like, go back to your original provider, whoever you chose that to be.
Alex, this has been just mind-blowing for me. So I think you gave, yeah, I'm so grateful for your time, and I'm gonna have to have you back on just to dig more deeply into, I think, all of the peptides, or many of them. So I don't think we could ever cover all of them, but and the markers that you like to look at to, inquire about that, because I'm just so fascinated. But for everyone listening, how do they get into your world? How do they learn more and geek out with you like I want to after this episode?
I mean, I wanna be your friend, so let's hang out, but, also, I'm on all the socials, but I would say if you wanna geek out, head over to Substack. You can look up my name or my articles are under, the publication Everything Looks Good, because it's funny. And so I'm publishing articles there, and then I actually publish a couple pretty science heavy notes every day. So you can self-educate. If you want to consult with us, but you have great providers, all everyone comes through us, does a full circle evaluation that's it's under $500. It's done in 2 weeks. If you already have your testing, there's no additional cost. Oftentimes you get, I would say, 30 to f I'm wordy. I like to talk, 30 to 50 pages of, evaluation results and then a 10 to 20 page protocol, and then you can take it back to your provider, and, like, we can either work with them if they can't prescribe these things, because some providers are a little nervous about that, and then you can work with us as your prescriber or your, we have a bioadaptive regulation specialist, we have a trauma specialist, like, you can work with us for your kind of, like, extra stuff. Or if you don't have a provider, you can stay on with us. But I really want to make sure you know that Substack is totally free. None of it costs a prescription or prescription, a subscription. None of it is under a subscription and a paywall. And then you can get all of this tailored to you for under $500 because we want to make sure that everyone gets this. Like, everyone should have it.
That's amazing. I will put all of these links in the comments. Alex, thank you so much for your brilliant mind and your energy today. I have learned so much.
Thank you for having me and for asking dope questions, because it's like it's really fun when someone I love getting interviewed by another practitioner. It makes it so much richer. So thank you for your work and for your dedication to the same population.
Thank you. Thank you. And sisters, I feel like this is an episode you could listen to a few times. Or, of course, if you have questions, reach out to Alex or myself. But most importantly, I think you have some really clear tools now to continue to go out in your life and be more in it and not just less on a scale. We'll,
Do not settle.
yeah, we'll catch you in the next episode.
If you're 35 plus and ready to stop guessing, start understanding your hormones, and feel your absolute best, hit subscribe. That's what we do here.